It's the most well-known frontier of the Roman Empire. Hadrian's Wall. For centuries it has fascinated antiquarians, historians and visitors, and I've come to learn more about it. In this documentary, I'm going to be going on a journey along the wall. I'm going to be visiting some of its greatest sites, learning more about its history, and I'm going to be learning about some groundbreaking new archaeological discoveries that continue to tell us more about what life must have been like on this far-flung frontier almost 2,000 years ago. Welcome to Hadrian's Wall.
First stop on my tour is one of Roman Britain's must-see sites, Vindolanda. Situated deep in the heart of the Northumberland countryside, surrounded by rolling hills that seem to stretch for miles on end, this idyllic spot is home to some of the most extraordinary archaeology of Roman Britain. To find out more, I've come to meet Dr. Andrew Burley, the Director of Excavations at Vindolanda.
So Andrew, we're outside at Vindolanda itself.
We are indeed, yeah, we're at the site.
And first of all, geographically, where is Vindolanda in regards to Hadrian's Wall?
Well, it's part of Hadrian's Wall, but in terms of the curtain wall, the big barrier, we're about a mile behind the curtain wall of Hadrian's Wall. So the reason for that is we're on the original frontier highway, the frontier road, the Staingate Road, which was here 40, 50 years before Hadrian's Wall was built.
Ah, so Vindolanda actually predates the construction of Hadrian's Wall?
It wasn't even a twinkle in Hadrian's eye. In fact, Hadrian didn't exist when this place was put into action.
And why do we think it was built in around 85 AD?
Well, the Romans are consolidating after they've been withdrawing from northern Britain, what we call Scotland today, and they decide to use this narrow part of the country, which is then reused for Hadrian's Wall, to put a road east-west across the landscape and to be able to move troops and supplies and hold down this territory. So Vindolanda is part of that sort of line in the sand, the initial line in the sand, and part of the sort of conquest of this part of the country.
So when we do see Hadrian coming here and we're looking at the original design of Hadrian's Wall with the mile castles and the turrets, this would have been one of the forts that was stationed just behind the wall.
This is a construction fort for the wall, this is a garrison fort for the wall, and eventually, of course, the people who live here go up and build a new fort over there about a mile away, right onto the wall itself. But because Vindolanda is in such a good spot, it just gets renewed again and again and again. They never abandon it. In fact, when Hadrian's Wall was mothballed briefly in the 140s, 150s and 160s to go up and build this newfangled turf thing, the Antonine Wall, Vindolanda maintains an active presence. We have new forts, new populations, new garrisons, despite the fact that most of Hadrian's Wall is mothballed and the troops are up serving well north of here, 100 miles further away, because it's in such an important spot. And that main road that was put here by the Romans when they first built the site is the main artery. It's the M1 or the M6 of the period, taking troops and supplies east and west right across the heart of the country.
And you mentioned that longevity just there. I mean, because it seems there are several layers to this site, aren't there, over the centuries?
Underneath where we're standing, believe it or not, and including that fort you see down there, the big wall in the distance, there are 9 separate forts in this landscape. You've got 7 metres of archaeology under our feet.
And it seems like it was very much, for centuries, undisturbed too.
Pretty much, yeah. I mean, the bathhouse we've just walked around here still had its domed roof on in the 17th century, and it still had painted wall plaster with ladies and carafes on the heads, smoke stains coming up the walls. It just became very rural and therefore very protected.
Amazing, absolutely astonishing. And where are we walking now? Is this the road that you mentioned?
Well, we're walking down the high street, going towards the gate of the fort. This is the main shopping precinct in the 3rd century. The old Staingate Road actually links outside the north gate of the fort and comes in a straight line past the site. So we're on the sort of the side road going into the main fort itself. But it's on a bit of an angle, this, compared to the fort. And the reason for that is that all this is effectively a fossil of the early central roads inside the big forts. So what you're looking at there, about 3.5 acres, the last fort of Vindolanda, is also one of the smallest. So most of the bases here are 2 or 3 times the size of that one we're going to enter.
It's quite interesting how he said the latest of the forts in this, well, at this site is also one of the smallest rather than one of the biggest. They get smaller.
They get smaller because you've got such a concentration of soldiers in the area. Once you've got Hadrian's Wall being constructed, you don't need those early massive bases that are here before the wall is built. You've got more of a dispersal going on. And also, of course, when you get into the 4th century, the whole nature of the Roman army changes as well. You lose a lot of frontline soldiers and you get soldier farmers, border guards, frontiersmen. And you may only have a couple of hundred of those rather than 600 soldiers in a base like that.
And in regards to the latest archaeology, like the latest sites, what times are we talking? How long after the Romans leave are we talking here?
You can go up to about 600 or 700 AD.
Wow.
So, you know, the end of Roman Britain, I mean, it's a bit of a controversial subject. I mean, was it 410? Was it 47? It's around there. Anyway, irrespective of that, this place transforms itself from being a Roman base, a Roman military establishment in the 4th century, into a British base in the 5th, 6th and 7th century. And eventually, from a military establishment into more of a religious base, a religious centre for the local community. And we see that when we get inside those walls and we look at the latest layers of archaeology, instead of finding barracks and other Roman buildings and houses, we find churches, lots of churches built inside this fort.
Well, let's go and have a look.
Let's go and have a peek. So, this is where we've been excavating. And you'll see lots of different things going on down here. First of all, the corner of this building down here is the edge of a schola, an officer's clubhouse. This is where soldiers who don't have traditional space inside the fort to live, but are quite senior in rank, and their families would mess. They would live in there, they get their food in there, they get their laundry done in there. And if, you know, visitors come to the site from other forts, this is where they'd be housed when they were here for their visit. And on top of that, you can see another building cutting across, and that's a 4th century storehouse with the barracks and the granaries on the other side. Now, above this, we come a little bit further down, and all the sort of demolition of the end of Roman Britain, we get this telltale dark earth, which is so traditional on many sites across Britain at the end of the Roman period. And we used to think that meant that there was very little going on, but that's not true. We now understand that that dark earth represents lots of organic matter that's rotted in situ. And we've had a timber building cutting across our Roman remains where the dark earth is, and that dark earth is the timbers rotting in situ. And above that, the stone foundation curving around here, this curved wall of a 5th or 6th century church. Now, it's very badly built. It's a stone foundation for a timber superstructure. These people, their medium isn't stone, they build in timber, that's what they prefer to use. So they're literally just trying to raise the timbers out of the ground. And this building eventually, because it's poorly built, had collapsed in on itself. So you get this incredible jumble across the site. And it's hard to unpick. And unfortunately for structures like this, in the past, when antiquarians excavated places like Vindolanda and other sites on Hadrian's Wall, sometimes they just miss this stuff altogether because all they would see is a jumble of stone, and they wouldn't realise, because it's so visually poor, that they're actually dealing with a post-Roman building or a wall or a structure. They would just go through it thinking, oh, that's just fallen rubble, let's take it out. So once this curve had come across the street where we're standing, all the way down here, and would have linked into the back of the building, and this bit was excavated a long time ago, and it's gone. It wasn't recognised in the 1930s when the excavation was done. But with modern techniques and appreciation of what we're looking for, we managed to detect the other half of the space, the other half of the building, and most importantly, the artefacts from within it and around it. Now, what happens next is all that grass over there, Tristan, that's all going. Next year, that's all going to disappear. And you can see a little mound in front of the wheelbarrows there, in fact, another mound where the wheelbarrows are as well. And each of those mounds represents a building that's contemporary with the church. Now, I can't wait to see what we're going to find under there when we start excavating again next year. It could be very exciting.
I mean, if it's anything like the finds you found so far, it promises to be very exciting indeed.
Well, watch this space and we'll see what happens, yeah.
Future excavations look set to reveal more about Vindolanda's later history, when Christianity was firmly established at the site. But what about religious worship at Vindolanda in earlier times, in the Roman period?
So of course for centuries before the arrival of Christianity on this site, paganism at the site was prevalent.
Yes, it was people expressed themselves any which way they wished. They could pick any religion they wanted. There was no real state religion as such, although of course Jupiter Optimus Maximus was the sort of the head of the Roman pantheon. However, wherever you travelled across the Roman Empire, you'd pick things up and you'd worship local deities, you'd cover your bases basically. And of course, as Roman soldiers move around so much in their communities, they pick up all sorts of things and they bring those things to Britain. And built into the northern ramparts of this fort is a temple dedicated to an Eastern cult, a mystery cult. Now, unlike Mithras, this cult is really inclusive. Anybody can become a member. You don't just have to be male, you don't just have to be wealthy or part of the elite. Slaves can join this cult. And that makes it a little bit different to most of the other cults at the time that come from an Eastern origin. But it shares some symbolism with Mithras and other places, as we'll see when we look at the altars inside the actual temple. So in 2009, this area was being excavated. It was all under grass. You've got to imagine the grass turf coming across the top here. And we'd found a little drain in the corner of the fort wall, and we thought, great, we're going to find a new Roman toilet block in the corner of our fort. Because up until that time, nobody had ever found a temple inside the walls of an auxiliary fort. So it wasn't even on the list of things that we thought could be possible. But as we continued to excavate across here, we found a heated dining room. We thought, well, that's not really the sort of thing with the hypercourse columns you're going to get in the toilet. I mean, nice to have a heated toilet, but not really sensible. And as we crossed across this way, we found the remains of a little aedicular or a shrine, and then the top of the first big altar sitting still in its original position outside the walls of the shrine.
I mean, this is absolutely extraordinary. One saying this is also to an Eastern god, but also it's within the fort itself.
It's within the fort itself, and that can only be possible if it has the patronage of the commanding officer. Somebody with high enough authority to say, we are going to worship this god or goddess in this space. But what it also represents is the start of a new idea or a new way of thinking to actually bring the power in heaven, if you want, or power in the heavens, and the power on earth, the commanding officer and the regiment, together. This sort of very medieval concept that you share the same space, that these two things rub together. And at Vindolanda, that's what's going on in the 3rd century. So here we've got the altar dedicated to the god. In this particular case, Jupiter Dolicanus, an Eastern god, who comes all the way from the Hittites and the Hurrians, Hesheb. So he's got a really long origin. He's standing on a bull, so very, very similar to sort of Mithras and Mithraeans.
Yes.
And on the front, the dedication reads to Jupiter Optimus Maximus, because everything has to be then worked into the Roman pantheon. Dolicano for Dolicanus, and then the name of the dedicator, Sulpicius Pudens, who's the Prife, commanding officer of the 4th cohort of Gauls, who willingly and deservedly fulfilled his vow. So he was a good lad. The god, gave up his part of the bargain. So Sulpicius Pudens duly put the altar up to say thank you very much. And now, as soon as he's done that, he can ask for something else because he's fulfilled his end of the contract. So great, now I can ask for my next favour from the god. And what's good about this god is this god's in charge of the weather. He's a weather god, and he's also associated with metalworking. And these are the two of the main aspects which military communities have to deal with all the time.
And sorry, Greg, what is he actually holding in his hands?
So
is that an axe?
what he's got an axe in one hand, and this is part of his sort of metalworking and striking things down, and then lightning bolts in the other. So that sort of classical Jupiter lightning bolts and axe. But of course these particular symbols can be found all the way back through Hadrian and Hittite representations of this god in his earlier form.
This feels very unique to all the sites across or near Hadrian's Wall.
We don't have anything quite like it. We don't have anything inside an auxiliary fort. Unfortunately, at the moment, we don't have another really properly well known or understood or identified temple in an auxiliary fort anywhere in the Roman Empire. So from that perspective, it is unique. However, I do think this is probably more down to a lack of research or excavation than the fact that they weren't there. Vindolanda is great at leading the way in that regard because we've done so much work. You can see so much of the site being exposed and worked on. And so as we do a total excavation, things like this can't remain hidden. But excavating fort ramparts isn't terribly fashionable. It's, people tend to prefer to look at barracks or buildings. They don't look at those spaces, but perhaps they should, based on the evidence of this temple.
Absolutely. Well, I'll leave a votive offering here for good weather for the days and
Please
weeks
do.
to come.
We really need it for the next couple of months. That'd be great.
Thanks to the hard work of Andrew and his team, including a whole host of passionate volunteers, the extensive excavations at Vindolanda have resulted in some astonishing archaeological discoveries. Rare finds, brilliantly preserved, that provide us an invaluable insight into what life was like at this settlement almost 2,000 years ago. Many of these finds are now on display at Vindolanda's very own beautifully curated museum.
So Andrew, we've just walked inside. Where are we
Yep.
now?
Well, we're in one of the first main galleries of Vindolanda, and this is our sort of wall of shoes from the site here. And we've got some fantastic footwear on display from all different types of social strata, all sorts of men, women, children's shoes. And this is one of the most emotive cases because it makes an instant connection to most of our visitors who come to the site, to Vindolanda. Because of course we all wear shoes, or most of us wear shoes. And so it's something that you can straight away rationalise and connect with. But the fun thing about these items is that, of course, they represent very often people who are hidden otherwise archaeologically. So particularly the women and children's shoes, because everybody uses the same stuff. But because we're anatomically different, and of course different age groups have different sizes of footwear, it shows us where people of different types were in different spaces, which would otherwise be, as I say, invisible to the naked eye or to the archaeological record, particularly children. So we find lots of these children's shoes, which are really sweet, very cute things, inside military barracks, inside those spaces. And that's helped us to disprove the argument that Roman forts were just the male preserve, they were just a male environment. Because if you've got these kids running around, that clearly isn't the case.
It's absolutely astonishing. It feels like a double whammy here. It's not only that it's organic material that survived, as you said, it's also revealing sometimes the hidden aspects of the fort with the women and the children.
That's right. I mean, and you think about it, you think of Hadrian's Wall, the Roman army, lots of big, hairy Roman soldiers running around the countryside doing this stuff. But they were really just the tip of the spear. And if you then add in the footwear as a representation of the rest of the community, you realise that it was much bigger than that tip of the spear, and that military community was a really impressive thing.
And why do so many pieces of organic material survive at Vindolanda?
We've got this fantastic anaerobic conditions, oxygen free, there's very little air under the ground, and without the oxygen, bacteria can't break things down, doesn't have the energy to mush stuff up and turn it into soil. So if you bury an item of footwear or something that's made of wood or something like that from the site, and there's some more cracking examples over here.
Oh, yes.
If you bury these things under the ground, like this little children's shoe here, or this little child's shoe, it should come out of the soil in the same condition it was put in 2,000 years ago. Now, if it was a really rotten, horrible thing, it's not going to be improved by being under the ground for 2,000 years, but it'll be close to the preservation level, if not exactly as it was 2,000 years ago, if it's rapidly sealed. And that's the beauty of this site, buried under rich Northumberland soil, deep down, sometimes 6 or 7 meters down, you get all of this stuff surviving.
Once again, just before we go on, I absolutely love the detail of that surviving with the patterns either at the bottom of the shoe or on the sides of the shoes themselves.
There's some real designer footwear items here. This isn't just make do, this isn't just sort of, cheap stuff. I mean, over here we've got a lady's slipper, we call it the Leopardina slipper, and it's a fashion item that's coming from the continent. So, this is an expensive item that's come to the frontier. Although they're on the edge of the empire, it doesn't stop them looking great. Having the latest fashions, the latest trends. Now, this little display here represents a fraction of the number of shoes that have come from the site. So we have over 5,500 items of footwear.
1,000?
And possibly over 100,000 left to find.
Really?
Wow. Yeah.
I mean,
yeah.
Why do you think they decided to leave all of these shoes here?
Roman army, really mobile. So, but if you're in this space for 5 or 10 years, you know yourself, if you go to move house or even move bedroom, and you think, right, I've got to move all this stuff somewhere else, and you just, where did all of this come from? How much stuff have I actually got? And the Roman army are the same. So they can only carry what they can carry on their backs or a mule, when they go to their next posting. And if they've just been gathering stuff and buying extra things for themselves, then they've got a really hard choice to make. Do I take it with me or do I just dump it? And a lot of stuff, they've got to dump. They've got to get rid of it.
I could ask questions about this for hours, but let's move on.
So as we go through the museum here, we've got lots of different items. Of course, we're a military site, so you get a lot of evidence for war, military activity. And so you've got ballista bolts, spears, practice swords made of wood, slingshots, a little sling pouch there, and of course, victims of the conflict as well. And this young man here has had his head cut off and mounted on a pole on the ramparts of Vindolanda in the Severan period, so the beginning of the 3rd century. And you can see the battle damage he's taken to his skull. So he's had this side caved in with a blunt instrument, and this side here has been hit either with a sword or a spear, and it's sliced the edge of his skull out. So he's been in quite a state. And it just reminds us that although we've got all the women and children here and a mixed community, the purpose of the Roman army being here is very much war and to suppress the local population.
I mean, once I was looking at the wooden sword again, organic material, and it's a training sword, so once again, a hidden aspect even of the military side.
Well, that's right. And you look at stuff like that, and it's tempting almost to think of them as toys, almost like a toy sword that you might have had as a child. I certainly had little toy swords. I remember my dad making me a toy sword. I was well chuffed, and I could sort of hit my sister with it. But these sorts of things here, training, practice, it's absolutely essential. And of course they'd give toy swords to their kids as well, because if you're a young boy growing up in this military community, the natural aspiration for you from your parents would be to join the regiment, to become another member of the army.
Well, talking about arms and armour, I mean, my eyes was instantly taken to this.
To this.
Horse armour.
Yeah, the chamfron. Now, we think of the soldiers being very decorative, but of course, the cavalry is hugely blingy too. And this is probably the sort of headdress they would wear whilst on parade or doing manoeuvre. But of course, the horses have to be armoured as well as the men, so they can survive in this environment. And part of the process of the Roman army in terms of its image and its projection of power is to be very blingy, be very in your face, almost sort of like the redcoats in the sense that you could see them coming over the hillside from miles and miles away. And so not just the soldiers, but the horses would also just shine and shimmer in the light because of all of the bronze and the copper alloy which is attached to their armour. So this headdress is rather lovely, but if you come around the corner, you can see even the basic stuff. All the trimmings and the harness belts and buckles, they're all really shiny too. So you can just imagine this very bright, dazzling force coming over the hills. And very noisy, because all this stuff clanks and clinks, So a little bit like a Stuka in World War II dive bombing down and creating that fear. You could hear a Roman army and see a Roman army from a long way away.
Oh yeah, it must have been designed to impress, if you're looking over the hill, you're a small war band approaching the wall or whatever, you see it shining in the sun, but as I said, also you can hear it coming too.
You can hear it coming, you think, oh no, time to run and hide.
Yes, we've been spotted.
So swords survive, in the soil too, other bits and bobs, more leather, but what I really want to show you is right in front of us here. So every now and then we get something which is beyond the realms of what we expect to ever find. It's not even on an archaeologist's dream shopping list. And what we've got here are two examples of that. So we've got boxing gloves from some of our earliest periods, from a cavalry barrack, from actually Burley soldiers from northern Spain, who are just sitting on the barrack floor. Two different types of glove, a practice glove, which is very softly padded with leather, and then the glove below has a hardened leather trim on the edge, fire hardened, and it was packed with straw when we found it, and that's used to, obviously the straw to protect the knuckle, but also to slice the opponent to make them bleed. So a practice glove and a bout glove. And what I love about this is its sort of multifaceted nature, how it helps to understand training, unarmed combat, in terms of there's no sword here, so fitness, and of course sport, and then entertainment. This represents all those things. And of course, Roman soldiers would be betting on boxing matches. They'd have their favourite heroes who are boxing champions. You'd have inter-unit rivalry. You'd have your Varduli taking on your local champion down the road. And it just shows a different aspect of life entirely to work that you imagine when you think of a Roman army.
Absolutely. So we can imagine almost 2,000 years ago, Spanish soldiers serving in the Roman army, when they're not on patrol or whatever, they're at a boxing match, or they're watching a boxing game, and here are the gloves.
Here's the evidence. Here's the evidence. And these are the only surviving boxing gloves from the Roman Empire, and the earliest surviving boxing gloves for over 1,600 years.
That is a real treasure in the whole of the Roman Empire.
In the whole of the Roman world, yeah. And you know, we have evidence for these gloves on sculpture. We have evidence on wall paintings. We have mosaics showing boxers, particularly in Ostia. That's a fantastic mosaics, but never before have we been able to actually find the gloves.
This museum is full of wonders. Pottery from far-flung corners of the Roman Empire, intricately detailed jewellery, animal remains, and so much more. But there is one set of objects that are especially significant.
So Tristan, the pièce de résistance, the
Yes,
most important thing.
In a museum full of treasures, this feels like this is one of the star attractions.
This is a vault, and I'm just going to close the door for a second, so we're not disturbed, because this space here holds our top treasure. And what we're looking at here are the writing tablets, the Roman letters, the Roman documents that survive from the site. Postcards from the past.
Postcards from the past.
Postcards from the past, yeah. And you can see they're actually quite hard to read. And actually with the naked eye, this looks completely blank. It's not completely blank, it's actually covered in ink handwriting. And to tease that writing back, we have to use infrared photography, because it picks up the carbon on the ink and just allows it to come back so we can read it. And actually this letter here is a letter by our first commanding officer, the founder of Vindolanda, in his own handwriting, a guy called Julius Vericundus. So it's really, really important. Other things are a bit easier. This one here, you can probably see the writing there a little bit more easily.
Oh yes.
It's a lighter wood, and we've got a letter here from a guy called Masculus, writing to Vericundus, Vericundo, and he says, Suo salutum. How are you doing? On the top line. And this is a letter coming to this man, our commander, from a cavalry detachment commander who's got some troops from Vericundus's regiment based at Vindolanda, and he's basically saying, can I give them a holiday? Are they all right to have some leave? And then he has a few anecdotal bits and bobs. Other letters just give us such a rich idea of what's going on. So we've got transactions up here between the commanding officer and a slave, and down here we've got, well, how do I describe this? We've got a conflict at work going on. So a centurion is misbehaving, who Vericundus is in charge of, and he's based somewhere else, and other high-ranking officers are complaining about his attitude, saying, look, it's just not acceptable, he's causing problems, we have to let you know, what are we going to do about it? So we've got a little bit of an industrial dispute taking place. And these are very modern issues, which are coming out from the frontier. And so this commanding officer is having to deal with the sort of stuff that any office manager or captain of industry or supervisor would have to do in any modern firm environment, whether it's a supermarket or a manufacturing place, whatever, or the army, let's be honest. And that humanizing effect of the letters, the fact that they give us little windows into the souls and the aspirations of the people, can't be beaten by any of the other artifacts in this building.
Absolutely. So these are almost 2,000 years old, and things we don't normally hear about in ancient sources, like senior management, like what the day-to-day tasks and the issues that a commander would have to deal with in the army. It gives us an insight into that.
This is probably why Julius Vericundus, I would imagine, lost his hair in his 30s, having to deal with issues like this. Oh, not that bloke again, and I'm moving him around, trying to sort him out. But this is the power of the writing tablets, and we've got about 15 or 16 on display here. There are around about 2,000 that have come from the site. More will come from Vindolanda, but also other places in Roman Britain, and the rest are on display or in storage in the British Museum. But because of their power to give us history unfiltered, direct from the mouths of the people who were living through it, that is uncomparable in terms of a resource.
It's so precious, isn't it?
It
Absolutely
really is.
precious.
So they don't look like much, but by God, they're powerful stuff.
I can imagine, really imagine. And is it just military stuff that we hear about in these tablets, or is there so much more?
Oh, so much more. I mean, basically, if you live at Vindolanda and you want to contribute properly to this community, you have to be literate. So no matter what your rank, your status, I mean, this letter over here is referring, Julius Vericundus is writing to a slave, and he's complaining to the slave because the slave has sent some stuff up. He sent a magic box to Vindolanda and all sorts of other bits and bobs and supplies. But he hasn't sent the key, so he can't get in the magic box. So he's having a real go at him, saying, oh, you know, get yourself sorted out. So the slave is obviously very literate, and a lot of them were. They do really reflect all parts of society. And what's lovely, Tristan, is that we're not dealing with kings and queens, the governors of Roman Britain, or empresses or emperors. You know, we're not dealing with the people who made those massive decisions. These are people who are living their daily lives 2,000 years ago.
Absolutely, Andrew. And you mentioned women and children earlier, and we saw with the shoes earlier as well. But that other hidden aspect sometimes we see of Roman life, that infamous aspect, the slaves, we're also learning more about the slaves from these tablets. That's brilliant.
We are, and you're quite right. I mean, if it wasn't for the tablets, they're completely hidden. I mean, how many of those shoes that we looked at earlier were owned by slaves? You know, impossible to say. But at least here, through the tablets on display at the site and at the British Museum, those people have a voice, and we're starting to learn a bit more about them, which is fantastic.
The writing tablets are the gift that keeps on giving for Andrew and his team. But it's not just extraordinary Roman discoveries that Vindolanda is famous for. Recently, a stunning discovery was made that rivals even the writing tablets.
Okay, Tristan, so through here, we've got a new gallery, just opened up this year, and it highlights a really important part of the story, because the end of Roman Britain, the end of Roman Vindolanda, is not the end of Vindolanda. It's the half-life of Vindolanda. So for at least another 300 or 400 years, people lived here, and this is the evidence for what happened next.
I'm very excited, really excited to see this. So what happened next?
Well, we get soldiers and their families still living here, and the site morphs into a Christian community, and that becomes the focus of activity at this place. And we get churches being built here, we get homes, and people live here for another 300 or 400 years, and they leave evidence of that behind. And the most important thing that they've left behind so far, and of course the excavations are ongoing, is this, in this special case here. What we've got here is a lead vessel, a chalice, found inside the walls of a Christian church. And it's very hard to see because it's very fragile, but each of these little fragments is incised with Christian symbols from the people living in the community at that time. And the combination of those symbols is astounding, absolutely astounding. So we have ships, fish, the little Holy Ghost, kairos, crosses, wheat or corn, angels, a little smiling priestly figure who could represent Psalm 21. It's all crammed inside and out onto the fragments of this lead vessel. And it's the only chalice to survive from this period from Western Europe.
Western Europe?
Yep. You know, this sort of Christian graffiti appears on fragments of stone. It appears on some wall paintings in Caesarea, some of it, not as much as on this vessel, but never on a portable artifact like this before, up until this point, has it been found. So it doesn't look much, a little bit like the writing tablets, don't look much, but in terms of what it can unlock about the tale of Christianity in Britain and the north of Britain in this period, at the moment it's unparalleled.
I mean, we've just seen with the writing tablets how there seems to be lots of writing crammed in to parts of the tablets. And it seems on this chalice too, can we call it early Christian graffiti crammed into the outside of this chalice?
Yeah. They've created on this vessel, they've turned it into a relic, a holy relic. And there is some debate about how this would have been used. When we look at Christian communities and how they practice their faith, their religion, All our examples really come from the Levant or other parts of the Roman Empire, or what was the Roman Empire. We don't really have that narrative for the north of Britain. This might help us understand that a little bit more. So the research is at the early days yet, but as it continues in the next couple of months and over the next year or so, we really do hope this is going to be the key to unlock a lot more about that period of history, what used to be referred to as the Dark Age of Britain, not just for Vindolanda, but for right across the north of England.
Just quickly on the symbols themselves, you mentioned there seems to be a variety of Christian symbols, but
There are.
the ships seem really interesting to me. I know it's not always that far from the coast wherever you are in Britain, but Vindolanda seems to be one of the furthest places you could be from the coast in Britain, and yet there seems to still be all these naval symbols.
Well, we are a bit landlocked for sure, but of course what this represents is our connectivity to the rest of the Christian religion, the rest of the empire in that sense, as it was. And that connectivity represented by the ships and the whales, but of course these are also biblical tales, you know, Jonah and the whale and the ships and all this sort of stuff, and the voyages that some of the early Christian saints took. They're all telling stories, like the Samian potteries tell the stories of the ancient Roman and Greek parables and tales. This vessel's doing the same thing, but for a new Christian community. So there are lots of reference points in here. I mean, obviously the fish, you know, feeding with bread and fish and loaves and fishes, you know, on the lake and all this sort of stuff. It all ties together to that narrative. When you don't have a Bible, you don't have this big textbook you can take around. And with that in mind, if we come around the corner here, we can see what you'd use instead of a Bible. So this lovely little worn stone here is a portable Christian altar. And this would be carried by the priest and used during his sermons, but also taken with him to go out and meet the congregation where they live, out in the community, out in the countryside around the site. And so what you've got on here is you've got a traditional cross, and then you've got a Cairo.
Yes, Cairo.
Now this dates, the combination of those two things dates this to somewhere between 450 and 550 AD. It's that transition between the Cairo and the cross coming in. And of course, you know, it's just such a wonderful thing to find. You can see how smooth the stone is worn by people touching it and using it. And that's always a lovely thing too. This little thing next door is also remarkable. It's the most northerly type of Christian iconography on this sort of implement that's ever been found. It's a nail cleaning strap end, and you can see here on the little drawing we have a happy Christian figure with a crook, little halo going around the top of his head. And what I think I really like about the Christian depictions in this period is they're all so cheerful.
Now, looking at all these Christian aspects, I've also seen something which you wouldn't immediately associate with the Christian religion, but you do see them around Hadrian's Wall. Mm-hmm. It's a lead phallus.
Good luck charms. Yeah. Well, in this transition period, you know, people are finding their feet, and we all know that Christianity borrows a lot of things from other religions, and of course, a lot of religions borrow things from other religions, whether it's particular festivals, times of day, the way they commemorate things. But good luck charms like this, or fertility symbols, you know, they just remain in use quite comfortably all the way through this period. And people are hedging their bets. You might be Christian, but are you sure that not having something like this will help? And of course, Christians, because they're Christian, doesn't necessarily mean they're not superstitious, or they don't, you know, give a voting or an offering. They don't pray, as an example. And so, of course they do. So things like this represent, again, that transition from one thing to another, and how people are hedging their bets a little bit as they live their daily lives.
Wow. Once again, that idea of transition. And as you say, Vindolanda, it not only predates Hadrian's Wall,
yep,
it also outlives the Roman occupation as well.
It does. It does. And hopefully, you know, when we work on more sites, we'll find that Vindolanda is not the exception to the rule, but it's actually more in keeping with what's going on elsewhere. It's just the fact that we've done so much work here that we're able to give this sort of detail to the stories that we can tell.
This Christian graffiti is the latest groundbreaking archaeological discovery to come out of Vindolanda, but it certainly won't be the last. Vindolanda may have been abandoned more than 1,000 years ago, but thanks to Andrew and his team, the story of this site is far from over. Excavations will continue. More unbelievable finds will be unearthed by brilliant volunteers. One thing is for certain, I'll be back.